In this tutorial, we're going to learn about charts. Charts are not built into Flutter, so we have to get a package. We get those packages from pub.dartlang.org. Just search for charts. In this case, we're going to use charts_Flutter. It's built by the official Google Charts team. You can see an online gallery, and they have, of course, full source code out on GitHub. These are pretty powerful charts, and they integrate smoothly and seamlessly into Flutter. I think I just invented a word, smoothly. Anyways, you get the drift. Let's dive into the code, and the first thing we need to do is actually install this. So we're going to update our pubspec.yaml, get our dependencies. Once that's done, we've got some imports. We're going to be using the random package out of math, and we're going to use the charts_Flutter package as a variable called charts. Now, we need to actually start building out our app here. First thing we want is some sort of data container, if you will. So we're going to make a class. We're going to call this sales. And in here, we're going to say string year and int sales. So basically want to know the year and how many sales we had in that year. Now that we've got out of the way, we can start working on our state. We're going to make a list of sales, and let's call this our data. This is where things are going to get a little tricky. We want a list that uses another list. And because they're both templated, it gets a little weird. So we've got our chart series, and in here we want to say sales and string. So we're going to have our sales class and a string. If you're not used to that kind of syntax, that's a template within a template, I'd highly advise you go back to the Dart for intermediate and possibly Dart for advanced tutorials if that just looks completely crazy to you. So we're going to call this list chart data. Now we need a function, and we need to actually, we're just going to dynamically build that chart data rather than download it from somewhere. So we're going to say void make data. Hope if I could spell data. I'm having one of those kind of weeks where I just cannot spell anything. All right, so we're going to say data. There we go. And rather than typing all that out, I'm just going to grab this, and I'm going to say chart data equal new. There we go. So basically we're building our two lists. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's go ahead and Control O, add our init state, and we're just going to call that make data. That way we know exactly what's going on with our state. So when this loads, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to go to our init state, which is going to call make data, and then we're going to run our code here. And this is where we're just generating our random data here. So we're getting the random out of the math class, and then we're just going to say for int I, and let's say 2010, and we want to go to, let's say 2019. Current year, just in case you're watching this in the future, is 2018. And then we're just going to add this to our data collection here. Data, add new sales. So we want our year, and then we want our random number here. So we're going to say RMD, next random, and let's give it a maximum of 1,000. We don't want anything too crazy in our chart data. Now that we've got our actual data, we need to put this into the chart series. The chart series is just a list of bars that's going to go across the screen. So we've got chart data, add new, and we're going to say new chart series. And as you can see, we've got some things we've got to add here. So let's break this down a little bit, make it a little easier to read. Let's add that. There we go. So our ID is just our chart ID. Wow, I have misspelled sales twice. I should get an award for that. Okay, so let's actually go ahead and add in a color here. So our color function, let's go ahead and make a function. And we are just going to say my biggest gripe about the charts is that you can't really use a built-in Flutter color. You have to use their material palette, which ironically goes back to the Flutter colors. So we're going to say charts material palette dot green, and we want the default shade. If you're wondering what this is, these underscores, that's just an anonymous variable. So we're just using that. That's one variable, and this is another variable. Because that function template takes 2 parameters, we're just saying we want to basically null variables. Now our data, this is going to be the data. And then we have our domain function and our measure function. These, of course, are going to be a little tricky as well. So for our domain, we're going to say the sales year. And for our measure, we're just going to pretty much copy and paste this. We want our sales. Just for giggles, let's also do the fill pattern. So here's our fill pattern function. And we want the charts dot fill pattern type, and let's just say solid initially. Let's do display name, and let's call this sales. Almost done. We need to go down here, and let's add this in here. Let's say sales data. Because we don't know how much room this is going to actually take, let's add it and expand it, and then add this as a child. And we're going to say new charts, and we want a bar chart. Let's give it our template here. We want it sales, and our series list is actually going to be our chart data. Let's save this, and let's run it. And sure enough, there's our graph. Now, because we're using random, every time we run this, it will have different data. So what exactly is going on here is a bit of a mystery until you really dive into the charts API. So let's review this super quick. We're using the random package out of math. We're using the charts package, of course. We have a class that we're just using as a data container. And then we have 2 lists. We have a list of our actual data, and then we have our series list. That's a bit of a mystery. Why do you need that series list? Well, that's because it's part of the charts API. That's the confusing part. If you add more than one, which you'll see in a future tutorial, you can actually have groups of series per element. It gets kind of complex. But right now, just kind of nod and blink and say, yep, I understand, even though you probably don't. Then we have our random, and then we're just generating some random data. And here is our actual chart series. We only have one series, which is right here. The single bar is a series. You can add more than one. That's called a group, and then each bar in the group would be a series. So each one of these is an individual data point. In here, we have an ID of sales. We have a color function, which is determining the color, just to show that we can change this. Let's say red. Notice how it didn't automatically update, so we got to rerun the whole app. Now it's suddenly red. Our data is our data. Our domain function is the sales year. So you can see the domain is across the bottom. There's our year, where our measure is across the left. We have a fill pattern of solid. We can actually change that as well. And let's just do forward hatch. Rerun this. And you can see it's now forward hatched. And the display name is sales. And then all we're really doing is we're just saying expanded and adding the new charts in there. Not too complex, but it's a little tricky if you don't fully understand what's going on. So really what charting is doing is taking a bunch of lists and putting them in a graphical format. Now we're going to look at grouping data. We've got a bit of code already done. We've got the charts installed in our pubs by camel. We've already done a packages get. We've got the includes that we need, and we've got the sales class, which is our data container. We've also got the same design pattern where we've got make data being called in an it state, and we've got our expanded with our charts. We've got 3 lists in here. We have sales, which is laptops, sales, which is desktops, and then we have our chart series, which is just our chart data. We're going to go ahead and we're going to focus on making the data in this tutorial. So let's go ahead and dive into this. Laptops equals, and we're just going to say a new list of sales. Let's just grab that. Now we've got our desktops, and then we're going to just make our chart data here. There we go. Pretty simple. Let's go ahead and make some random information here. And we're just going to add the information into our list here. We've got our years, so we're going to say i.toString. We're just going to grab a random that's less than 1,000. Now we need to actually focus in on, you guessed it, the chart data. This is where things are going to get a little bit interesting. We're going to add more than one into a group. Let's go ahead and break this down a little bit so we can see what we're doing here. Our ID for this, we're just going to say sales, data. For this, let's say laptops. Then we have our domain function and our measure function. So domain function. Just copy this, put that right into our measure function here. And let's go ahead and add in a display name. Let's go ahead and add in a color too while we're at it here. not measure axis. Thank you, IntelliSense. It's material palette. There we go. We're going to make these green, and we want the default shade. Now, we'll want to actually take our desktops. So we're just going to copy this. Let's give this a different color. Let's call this red. Let's go ahead and run it. And let's see what it looks like. So now we have our series group. So on 16, you can see we have a green and a red. 17, we have a green and a red, etc., etc. That is how you would group data. And another neat little trick you can do, if you don't want it going horizontally, or I should say if you do, let's go with vertical equal false. Now we're going to have to rerun the whole thing. And you can see it now comes out from the left side. We're going to go ahead and look at pie charts. I've already got the charts package installed and have done a packages git, and we're going to just pretty much start from scratch. The only really thing you should note is we got our imports already in there. All right, let's go ahead and make our data container. We're going to do this one a little bit different. And then we're going to say charts.color. There we go. So now we've got our year, sales, and colors right in there. Save us a little bit of typing. I am going to copy and paste out of my notes. So we have our data, and then we of course have a chart series, which is our chart data. Now we can start fleshing out our make data function here. First thing we want to do is, well, you guessed it, we want to actually make our lists. So let's go ahead and say chart data, grab this guy. And now we're going to manually make some data here. So we're going to say sales. Hope if I put the equal sign in there. And we're just going to manually make this list. And in here we want a new sales. Notice how it takes a year, a sales, and a color. So we're going to say 0. Let's call this 100. And for our color, let's say charts.material palette red. We want the default shade of red. Now, through the magic of copy and paste, we can just add a few more in here. Let's add 75. Actually, let's switch that back to 100. Change that one to 75. There we go. 25, and let's do 5. And let's just pick some random colors here. So we got blue, let's say green, and let's do yellow. So now we've got our chart data along with our actual data. Now we need to go ahead and flesh out our chart data here. So we want to go ahead and add this, and we're going to say new chart series. There we go. We're going to just call that sales. Data, we just obviously want our data in there. And then for our color function, and now we've got our domain and our measure function in there as well. Pretty simple to see what's going on here. We've pretty much just got the same design pattern where we have chart data and data. Our data, instead of making random, I wanted to hard code them so you could really see what's going on. When you get random in pie chart, it can look a little weird sometimes. If something is a very small value, you just won't see it at all. All right, let's go down here. And let's add an expanded. And in our expanded, we're going to say new charts.py. So we want our pie chart in there. We're going to add our chart data in. We want to animate this just because I like animations, they're pretty cool. And animation duration, I'm going to make it a little slow just because the video recording, I want to make sure it actually catches this. And let's say seconds equal, let's go with 5, make it a little slower. There we go. It's not liking that. Function pie chart is not defined. What is going on here? Oh, probably missing the new because it thinks it's a function. We don't want a function, we want a class. There we go. Even in the intermediate, we're making mistakes. All right, let's go ahead and run this and see what it looks like. So this is our beautiful pie chart. You can see that animation is nice and slow. But that's the reason why I wanted to hard code, because let's say this yellow came in at like a 1. It would be this little sliver and you wouldn't see it. But let's run that again just so you can see that animation. This is how you get really high grade, high professional applications in Flutter using chart animations.